The Austin air hit Ethan like a wall. Humid, laced with exhaust and thrumming with bass, March SXSW. Not his usual circuit, but a paying gig was a paying gig. He pulled the collar of his worn denim jacket tighter. A futile gesture against the heat, and navigated the sidewalk chaos. A swirling vortex of lanyard-wearing tech bros, aspiring musicians with guitars slung over their shoulders, and generally, a lot of people, he deliberately chosen clothes that screamed local, attempting to blend into the vibrant, almost overwhelming energy. Low profile was the key. He wasn't here to make waves, just a quiet security assessment for a handful of smaller venues, a reputation burnisher while he waited for the real work to come through. His rental, a black Ford Focus, idled illegally near the Austin Convention Center. His client, a venture capital firm called Novatech, had a booth showcasing a new augmented reality platform. They hired him, ostensibly, to assess physical security, 30 entry points, crowd control. The usual. Ethan suspected it was more about appearing secure than never being secure. Novatech was the kind of company that valued optics above all else. He defiled the initial report, noting the glaring vulnerabilities. Too many unsecured Wi-Fi access points, minimal CCTV coverage, and a reliance on bored-looking security guards who looked more interested in their phones than the attendees. He checked into his anonymous Airbnb in East Austin, a converted bungalow smelling faintly of coffee and regret, and grabbed a passable breakfast taco sin, the first of many. He anticipated. Now his current task, a walkthrough of a VIP preview event at the Bloom, a newly converted warehouse space downtown hosting a curated collection of digital art. Novatech had a vested interest in the Bloom's success. The R platform was integrated into several of the installations. The Bloom was a different beast entirely. Gone were the crowds. Replaced by a hushed, curated atmosphere, the air smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. He flashed his temporary access badge and entered, immediately swallowed by a cavernous space bathed in shifting projections. Geometric shapes danced on exposed brick walls. Holographic figures flickered in mid-air, and pulsating light installations created an immersive, if slightly disorienting experience. Ethan wasn't an artificionado. His aesthetic leaned more towards the utilitarian, clean lines, functional design. But he recognized talent and, more importantly, recognized vulnerabilities. His training, honed during a decade with the National Security Agency's elite cyber defense division, had wired him to see patterns, to identify anomalies, to anticipate threats, and almost immediately, he felt a prickling unease. The network here was busy. He had the Novatech client's credentials loaded on his phone, granting him limited access to the on-site Wi-Fi. Even with the limitations, he could see a strange pattern in the traffic. Not malicious, not yet, but unusual. Sporadic bursts of data, originating from seemingly random devices, all funneling towards a central server hidden somewhere within the Bloom's infrastructure. It didn't scream attack, but it felt wrong, like someone was probing, testing the perimeter. He walked past an installation consisting of a massive, shimmering screen displaying a delicate, ever-changing floral pattern. The artist, a reclusive coder named Anya Sharma, was celebrated for her groundbreaking work with generative art and NFTs. It was called Ephemeral Bloom. Anya was present, represented by a sleek, suited gallery owner who radiated practiced cool. Beautiful, isn't it? The gallery owner, Julian Vance, said, noticing Ethan's lingering gaze. Anya's masterpiece. It is a truly unique piece. The NFT is one of a kind. We've had significant interest. It is complex, Ethan replied, his eyes still scanning the network activity on his phone. The bursts were becoming more frequent, more insistent. Complexity is the point. It is a statement about the fleeting nature of beauty in the digital age. Vance gave a practiced smile. We were using Novatech SR platform to allow viewers to interact with the Bloom, to literally step inside it. Ethan nodded, forcing himself to focus. He forced a pleasant expression, that is, innovative. He almost missed the flicker on the massive screen. The delicate petals of the ephemeral bloom fractured, distorted into a glitching mess for a fraction of a second, before resolving back into its ethereal form. It was subtle, easily dismissed as an artifact of the generative algorithm. But Ethan's instincts screamed foul play. He casually moved closer to the installation, pretending to admire the artwork while discreetly running a diagnostic scan using a custom map he developed. The scan confirmed his suspicion. The system log showed a deliberate, localized disruption. Someone had injected a small piece of malicious code, just enough to cause a momentary visual glitch. "Everything all right?" Vance asked, his polished veneer cracking slightly. "Just admiring the technical achievement," Ethan said smoothly. "But I noticed a minor glitch just now. Perhaps a temporary system hiccup." Vance waved a dismissive hand, "Probably just the algorithm. We've been pushing the system to its limits. Anya is a perfectionist. She is always tweaking things." Ethan was convinced a perfectionist might allow for minor imperfections. But wouldn't leave a vulnerability exposed? He made a mental note to dig deeper. The uneasy feeling in his gut intensified as the preview event progressed. He continued monitoring the network, the anomalous traffic growing steadily, morphing from probing to something more focused. And then, the call came. "We have a problem," Vance said, his voice tight with controlled panic. He spotted Ethan across the room and rushed towards him, pulling him aside. "The NFT, ephemeral bloom, it is gone." Ethan's pulse quickened. He'd been bracing for something, but not this. Gone. Stolen. The digital wallet was compromised. The NFT has been transferred to an untraceable address. Vance's face was pale. "The gallery? Anya, we talking about a potential 7. Figure loss and the PR nightmare." Ethan immediately went to work. While Vance was dealing with angry investors and frantic security personnel, Ethan dove into the Bloom-S network, accessing the system logs with Vance's begrudging permission. The security was even more lax than he initially suspected. Basic firewalls, outdated intrusion detection systems, and a shared administrator account. It was a disaster waiting to happen. He traced the transaction history following the digital breadcrumbs left by the thief. The transfer had been executed using a complex series of obfuscated transactions designed to mask the origin point. It was professional work, not the hack of some amateur script kiddie. Around 9:45 p.m., while Ethan was still tracing the digital footprints, a smaller event, a tech startup pitch competition in a side room, experienced a brief but disruptive DDoS attack. The Wi-Fi crashed, the projectors went dark, and the live stream sputtered to a halt. It was quickly contained by the venue's staff, dismissed as a temporary overload. But Ethan knew better. The attack, though minor, shared the same characteristics as the anomalous traffic he'd been observing earlier. The same originating IP addresses, the same burst patterns. It was a test run, a distraction, and it had been precisely timed to coincide with his investigation into the stolen NFT. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Someone was watching him, someone was deliberately escalating the situation, probing his defenses, and testing the limits of his awareness. He needed a secure connection, a dedicated server, and more time to analyze the data. He excused himself, promising Vance he'd do what he could, and headed back to his Airbnb. He was less than a block away from the venue when he saw her. She was standing under the flickering neon sign of a dive bar, scribbling furiously in a notepad. He'd noticed her earlier at the Bloom, hovering on the periphery, observing everything. She had a sharp, inquisitive gaze and a disarming smile. Ava Rostova. He'd overheard someone referring to her as a culture journalist, specializing in the intersection of art and technology. She'd been asking pointed questions about Anya Sharma and the ephemeral Bloom installation. She looked up, catching his eye. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice surprisingly warm. Ethan offered a non-committal shrug, "Just leaving the event." "The art scene can be intense," she said, a wry smile playing on her lips, "especially when 7-figure NFTs go missing." He paused, measuring her. Was she just a curious journalist, chasing a story or something more? He decided to play along. You seem particularly interested in the ephemeral Bloom situation. It is a fascinating case, a breakthrough artist, a stolen masterpiece, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. I specialize in stories about the dark underbelly of the digital art world. There is a lot of money and ambition swirling around these NFTs, and that often attracts the wrong kind of attention, she said. Her eyes meeting his. I noticed you talking to Vance, the gallery owner with security. Ethan hesitated. Revealing his role felt risky, but he needed information. Consulting, he said, offering a clipped response. I was asked to assess the security protocols. Ava raised an eyebrow. And what did you find? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed an AD notification from his custom monitoring app. He glanced at the screen and his blood ran cold. The anomalous network traffic wasn't just increasing. It was converging. He quickly traced the source of the activity, expecting to find a compromised server, a rogue device, something predictable. He found neither. The origin point wasn't external. It wasn't even on the public-facing network, the botnet node, a sophisticated piece of malware designed to act as a command and control server was hidden inside the festival's own emergency broadcast system, buried deep within the infrastructure designed to keep attendees safe. The chipped formica of the Airbnb's kitchen table felt cold under Ethan's forearms. He hadn't slept. The image of the botnet node nestled within the festival's emergency broadcast system replayed in his mind. A ghost in the machine, Foodie ironic, considering his line of work. He'd spent the last 6 hours dissecting packet logs, ignoring the stale coffee and the growing awareness that he was wading into something far more complex than a simple NFT theft. The DDoS wasn't just a distraction, it was a smokescreen. While the AT team at the startup pitch competition scrambled to restore connectivity, something else had been happening, something far more insidious. Ethan had isolated a secondary data stream piggybacking on the attack traffic, a slow, deliberate exfiltration of data from the Bloom servers. They hadn't been after the NFT alone. They'd been after information. He traced the exfiltrated data to specific files Fundai Juan, Anya Sharma's project folders, server configurations, even personnel records. Someone had been mapping the Bloom's network, understanding its vulnerabilities, and carefully extracting targeted information. Anything Ava's voice startled him. She'd let herself in, possessed of a journalist's unapologetic persistence. She held 2 paper cups, steam curling from the dark liquid within. Black coffee, you look like you need it. He accepted the offering, gratefully. The DDoS was a cover. They were siphoning data while everyone was focused on the outage. Ava sat opposite him, crossing her legs. What kind of data? Everything they could get their hands on. Schematics, security protocols, personal files. It is not just about the NFT anymore. It is about access. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. And I think that NFT was more than just a pretty picture. He pulled up the metadata for ephemeral Bloom on his laptop. This thing is layered with encryption, multiple levels using algorithms I haven't seen in years. It is overkill for artwork, and there is executable code embedded within the image file. Ava leaned closer, her brow furrowed. Executable code like a virus. Not a virus exactly, more like a key. I'm still deciphering it, but I believe it is directly linked to Anya Sharma's financial ledgers, her crypto wallets, investment accounts, everything. So, stealing the NFT was a way to gain access to her money? Maybe. Or maybe it is about controlling her, or both. He paused. The level of sophistication here is unnerving. This isn't some opportunistic hack. This is a coordinated operation with significant resources behind it. Ava had been working her own angles. I've been digging through the attendee lists, cross-referencing them with financial records. There is a surge of new private investors at SXSW this year. A lot of untraceable funds flowing through shell corporations. People who weren't on the radar last year, and a handful of unusual attendees. Individuals with ties to cybersecurity firms and offshore banking. Unusual how? Let's just say their LinkedIn profiles don't match their known backgrounds. One guy listed as a marketing consultant has a documented history with a Russian intelligence agency. Another claims to be a venture capitalist, but has been flagged for money laundering in the past. Ethan nodded grimly. They're ghost professionals. They know how to cover their tracks. Their conversation was interrupted by a flurry of alerts on Ethan's phone. He glanced at the screen and swore under his breath. "What?" Ava asked, sensing his mounting frustration. "Kraken," he said, naming a major cryptocurrency exchange. "They've just been hit. A targeted attack, significant financial losses." He pulled up the newsfeed. The headlines screamed of a massive security breach. Kraken, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, was experiencing widespread outages and reports of stolen funds. And Anya Sharma used Kraken to manage her NFT earnings, right? Ava asked, already connecting the dots. She did. A substantial amount of her earnings were held in a Kraken wallet. The timing was too perfect. It wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't about stealing an NFT or even just Anya Sharma's money. Ethan began mapping the targets on a digital whiteboard, connecting the dots with red lines. The Bloom. Anya Sharma's financial accounts, Kraken. They all formed a constellation of interconnected entities. "Look at this," he said, zooming out. The Bloom hosted the art, Anya created it. Kraken held the funds. They're systematically targeting everything connected to ephemeral Bloom. Tightening the net. It is a focused campaign designed to cripple, to control. "But why?" Ava asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What is the ultimate goal? I don't know yet, but I have a feeling this is about more than just money. It is about control of the narrative, about undermining trust in the entire crypto art ecosystem." The tension in the room was palpable. The air felt thick with dread. Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting from concern to alarm. "I just received an anonymous message," she said, her voice tight. "Encrypted through a burner app. Someone claiming to have information about the theft." Ethan leaned forward, his senses on high alert. "What did they say?" She read aloud, her voice monotone. "The Obsidian Collective. They are the architects of chaos. Look deeper." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard whispers about the Obsidian Collective in the darker corners of the cybersecurity world. A shadowy group, rumored to be composed of former intelligence operatives and disgruntled hackers. They were known for targeting institutions they deemed corrupt or dangerous. But their methods were often extreme, their motives opaque. "The Obsidian Collective," he repeated, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "I've heard rumors they're dangerous. They don't just steal data, they dismantle organizations." Ava's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. So a theft wasn't the objective, it was just the opening move. "We're dealing with something far bigger than we thought." Suddenly, Ava's phone began to ring, an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then answered it, putting it on speakerphone. "Hello." A distorted voice, heavily filtered, crackled through the speaker. "You're getting too close, journalist. Back away. This doesn't concern you." Ava's jaw tightened. "Who is this?" The voice laughed, a cold, unsettling sound. "Consider this a friendly warning. Persistence will be detrimental to your health." The line went dead. Ethan immediately ran a trace on the call. But the number was untraceable, routed through a network of proxy servers. He couldn't get a location, couldn't identify the caller. "They know you're investigating," he said, his voice grim. "They're sending a message." Ava stared at her phone, her knuckles white. "They're trying to scare me. They're trying to scare Sribath out of us," Ethan corrected. "And they're good at it. This isn't a coincidence, Ava. Every move is calculated. Every event orchestrated. They're playing chess, and we're pawns." He got to his feet, pacing the cramped kitchen. "We need to figure out what the Obsidian Collective wants. What is so important about ephemeral Bloom that they're willing to risk exposure? To disrupt global financial markets." He paused, his gaze locking with Ava's S. "And more importantly, we need to find out what they'll do next." As he spoke, another alert flashed on his phone. It wasn't from his monitoring system. It was a notification from SXSW's official app. "Emergency alert. Security lockdown initiated. All attendees are advised to shelter in place. Further details to follow. Wythen." "Check the source of the alert," It wasn't a system-wide broadcast. It was a targeted message sent only to attendees within a one-block radius of the Bloom. And, crucially, he quickly verified. The source was not the legitimate emergency broadcast system he'd discovered the botnet within. This was Henry another layer, a different attack. "They're escalating," he said, his voice tight with apprehension. "Something's about to happen." The lockdown felt manufactured, too precise. SXSW was a chaotic organism, barely contained even on a good day. A genuine emergency would have triggered a festival-wide alert, not a targeted quarantine around the Bloom. Ethan and Ava huddled in the Airbnb, monitoring the situation through a patchwork of news feeds and dark web forums. The official line was a credible threat, but the lack of specifics reeked of a cover-up. Ethan had spent the last hour compiling fragmented reports on the Obsidian Collective. The group was a digital ghost. Leaving behind only whispers and wreckage, they'd been linked, tenuously, to a series of high-profile disruptions, a takedown of a pharmaceutical company accused of price gouging, a leak of classified documents exposing government surveillance programs, and the near collapse of a major online retailer following a devastating ransomware attack. Each incident shared a common thread. Not just the disruption itself, but the aftermath. The Obsidian Collective didn't just break things. They erased their tracks, they meticulously deleted logs, overwrote system files, and planted plausible deniability, creating a narrative that pointed towards other actors. They were masters of deception. "They don't want to be caught," Ava said, scrolling through a research paper on digital forensics. "They want to create chaos, then disappear without a trace." Precisely, and they're exceptionally good at it. Ethan pointed to his laptop screen, displaying a chart mapping the group's known activities. Their signature isn't what they finde do. It is what they findu do. They're experts at making it look like nothing happened. He'd been attempting to analyze the malware used in the DDoS and data exfiltration, but the code was sophisticated, polymorphic, constantly shifting its signature to evade detection. It was like chasing a phantom. Ava, meanwhile, had been digging into Anya Sharma's background. "I found something interesting. A few weeks before SXSW, Anya received a series of anonymous threats. Vague at first, then increasingly specific. They warned her against showcasing ephemeral Bloom, claiming it contained dangerous truths." "Did she report them to the authorities?" "No, she didn't trust the police. She told a friend she was worried about attracting unwanted attention. That is when she confided she'd implemented a failsafe. A backdoor hidden within the artwork's code." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "A backdoor? Why?" She said it was insurance. "A way to regain control if someone tried to tamper with the NFT. According to her friend, the backdoor could potentially lock the NFT, rendering it worthless, or even expose the identity of the thief." "Smart," Ethan said. "Very smart, but risky if the collective discovered it." He didn't finish the sentence. The implications were clear. The Obsidian Collective hadn't simply stolen the NFT. They'd been hunting for that backdoor, and they were likely still searching for a way to neutralize it. A jarring chime ripped through the tense silence. It was his hotel's front desk. "Mr. Walker, we had an incident. Someone reported a disturbance in your room." Ethan's blood ran cold. He hadn't told anyone he was staying at the Hotel Van Zandt. He'd specifically chosen it for its anonymity. "What kind of disturbance?" he asked, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Looks like someone forced entry. They ransacked the room. Police are on their way." He hung up, his mind racing. It wasn't a random break-in. The Obsidian Collective knew where he was staying. They were sending a message. "We need to go," he said, grabbing his laptop and a small encrypted drive containing his analysis. "Now." They slipped out the back door of the Airbnb, melting into the Austin afternoon. Ethan had anticipated this. He'd established a secondary safe house on the outskirts of the city, a friend's remote cabin in the Texas Hill Country. But the feeling of being hunted persisted. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. Every passing car felt like surveillance. At the safe house, Ethan resumed his analysis, pushing aside his unease. He focused on the stolen NFT, dissecting its metadata, meticulously examining every line of code. He needed to understand what secrets Ephemeral Bloom held, what truths the Obsidian Collective was so desperate to suppress. He discovered something unsettling. The NFT's code wasn't just linked to Anya Sharma's financial records. It was linked to the blockchain records of 20 multiple transactions involving other artists, collectors, and financial institutions. Transactions that had been meticulously scrubbed from public view, erased. They're not just stealing assets, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They're rewriting history. Ava, who had been monitoring encrypted communication channels used by the art community, looked up, her face pale. I think I found the launch point for the attack, where there is an interactive art installation inside the festival, sponsored by a tech firm called Chronos Systems. It is called Memory Palace's Tuin, a virtual reality experience that supposedly allows users to explore their own memories, altering and reconstructing them. Ethan's instincts screamed, that is it? A fitting title, don't you think? They're not just altering memories, they're altering reality. Chronos Systems is new to the scene, no real track record, but they've invested heavily in SXSW, their CEO. Julian Thorne is a ghost. No public profile, no known associates. Sounds about right. Ethan started mapping Chronos Systems' network connections, searching for vulnerabilities. They're using a heavily customized version of a standard VR platform. The code is obfuscated, designed to hide malicious activity. He realized something else, a chilling implication. The emergency lockdown hadn't been targeted at the Bloom. It had been targeted at the Furiwan, except everyone, except Eddie's browsing, Memory Palace. The collective had created a zone of unfettered access, a digital sanctuary where they could operate with impunity. They're using the VR experience as a front, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard, a way to mask their activity and manipulate data in real time. He traced the network connection from Chronos Systems servers. It wasn't a simple connection, it was encrypted, routed through a series of shell servers located in offshore data centers. But he was able to identify one consistent element, a secure fiber optic line running directly to a seemingly innocuous warehouse on the outskirts of the festival grounds, officially listed as a storage facility for event equipment. That is where they're operating from, he said, pointing to the location on a map. A secure facility hidden in plain sight, masked as an interactive art exhibit. He barely finished speaking when another alert flashed on his screen. This one wasn't a system notification. It was a direct message, sent through an encrypted channel he used for secure communication with former colleagues. Urgent, your name has been flagged. Multiple intelligence agencies are looking for you. Discontinue investigation immediately. You are in extreme danger. Ethan stared at the message, his face grim. He was officially off the grid. A target, the Obsidian Collective wasn't just attacking systems, they were attacking him. Suddenly, a new pattern emerged within the NFT's deeply buried code. Layers of encryption peeled back, revealing event timestamps embedded within the artwork's summary, not creation dates, but alteration dates. Each edit corresponded to a significant financial transaction linked to the art's ownership. And then, he saw it, a sophisticated algorithm designed to selectively rewrite blockchain records. The thefts weren't about stealing the art, and certainly weren't about money alone. They weren't interested in obfuscating specific transactions. They were interested in fundamentally altering the historical record, restructuring who owned what, when, and how. They weren't just stealing assets, they were stealing and rewriting the truth. The warehouse hummed with a deceptive quietude. From the outside, it looked like any other storage facility, stacks of crates and equipment haphazardly arranged within. But stepping inside was like crossing a threshold into another world. The air, filtered and cooled, smelled of ozone and expensive hardware. Rows of servers blinked rhythmically, bathed in the eerie blue glow of LED lights. It wasn't storage, it was a command center. Ethan and Ava had bypassed the outer perimeter flimsy fence and aboard security guard Theverty with relative ease. The real challenge was the digital security, a layered network of intrusion detection systems, firewalls, and biometric scanners. Ethan had spent the last 3 hours crafting a custom exploit, leveraging a vulnerability in the facility's HVAC control system to gain access to the internal network. Impressive. Ava murmured, navigating the maze of cables and server racks. They've spared no expense. They're not interested in subtlety, Ethan replied, his eyes scanning the room. They want to make a statement. They moved deeper inside, guided by Ethan's network map. The facility was divided into several sections, each dedicated to a specific function: data processing, code development, and network control. They were heading towards the core, the control room where the Obsidian Collective was orchestrating the attack. They found it behind a reinforced steel door, guarded by two heavily armed security personnel. Ethan and Ava moved with practiced efficiency. A flashbang grenade, a disarming maneuver, and a swift takedown neutralized the guards before they could raise an alarm. Inside the control room, a handful of individuals hunched over monitors, their faces illuminated by the flickering screens. They were oblivious to Ethan and Ava's presence, completely focused on their task. "They're initiating the cascade," Ethan said, his voice grim. "Look at the code." The main screen displayed a complex visual representation of the blockchain, with lines of code scrolling across the bottom. Each line represented a transaction, a movement of funds, and a series of highlighted blocks were pulsing red, indicating the targets for the rewrite. "They're going after the major players," Ava said, her voice laced with disbelief. "Banks, investment firms, even government institutions. They're trying to rewrite the financial history of the last decade." "The SXSW Finance panel starts in 30 minutes, Ethan said, calculating the timeline. "They're planning to trigger the rewrite during the live broadcast, maximizing the chaos and minimizing the chance of a coordinated response." Suddenly, a voice shattered the silence. Well, looks like we have visitors." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing, with a cold, calculating gaze. He wore a tailored suit and mirrored sunglasses, even indoors. "I am Silas," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, head of security. "And I'm afraid your little intrusion ends here." Silas wasn't just a security guard. He moved with a lethal grace, a trained operative. He signaled to the remaining personnel in the room, who immediately moved to intercept Ethan and Ava. A chaotic melee erupted. Ethan and Ava, despite being outnumbered, held their own. Ethan used his training in hand-to-hand combat, disarming opponents with swift, precise movements. Ava, surprisingly adept, utilized her environment, turning office chairs and cable spools into improvised weapons. But Silas was a different beast. He moved like a phantom, anticipating their every move, countering their attacks with brutal efficiency. He disarmed Ethan with a swift kick to the wrist, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. "You're good," Silas said, his voice a low growl, "but not good enough." He advanced on Ethan, his hand reaching for the weapon holstered on his hip. Ava reacted instantly, throwing a metal chair at Silas, momentarily disrupting his attack. Ethan used the opportunity to regain his footing, delivering a solid punch to Silas's jaw. Silas barely flinched. He grabbed Ethan's arm, twisting it with bone-jarring force. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered. "This isn't about money or power, it is about control. About exposing the corruption that permeates this system. We're not criminals, we're revolutionaries." Ethan ignored him, focusing on breaking Silas's grip. He used a leverage technique he'd learned during his NSA training, twisting his body and exploiting a weak point in Silas's stance. He managed to free his arm, but Silas responded with a swift knee to the abdomen, sending him crashing to the ground. While Ethan grappled with Silas, Ava raced to the main console, determined to stop the cascading rewrite. She began typing furiously, attempting to inject a counter-program, but the system was locked down, secured with multiple layers of encryption. "It is no use," she shouted. "I can't break through the security protocols." Ethan, battered and bruised, struggled to his feet. He knew he couldn't defeat Silas in a straight fight. He needed to buy Ava time. He charged at Silas, launching a series of distracting attacks, forcing him to defend himself. He knew he was losing ground, but he had to keep Silas occupied. "You're wasting your time," Silas said, effortlessly parrying his attacks. "You can't stop what is coming." Ethan ignored him, summoning every ounce of his remaining strength. He needed to get to the console to decrypt the malicious payload and deploy a patch. He lunged forward, dodging Silas's counterattack, and managed to reach the console. He began typing furiously, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The code was complex, obfuscated, designed to be impenetrable, but Ethan was a master of decryption. He'd spent years dismantling malicious code, and he wasn't about to be defeated now. Almost there, he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. But time was running out. Silas, having subdued Ava, advanced on Ethan, his face a mask of fury. "It is over," he said, raising his weapon suddenly. The entire facility plunged into darkness. All the lights went out. The servers sputtered and died. The screens went black. "What happened?" Ava shouted, disoriented. "He triggered the failsafe," Ethan said, his voice tight with frustration. "A complete network lockdown," Silas's voice, cold and triumphant, echoed through the darkness. "A precaution in case of unexpected interference. Consider this a lesson. You shouldn't interfere with forces beyond your comprehension." But even in the darkness, Ava wasn't deterred. She'd anticipated this. She'd used her secure channel to transmit all the evidence she'd gathered through the logs, the code snippets, the financial transactions, to a network of investigative journalists and cybersecurity experts. "I've released everything," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "The world is about to find out what the Obsidian Collective is up to." Ethan, working by the faint glow of his phone screen, continued to analyze the malicious code. He'd isolated the core routine, the trigger that would initiate the cascade of ledger rewrites. He was close to developing a patch, a countermeasure that could neutralize the threat. But the network lockdown had cut off all external communication. He was working blind, isolated, with time running out. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that the Obsidian Collective wouldn't let him succeed without a fight. The festival had imploded. The abrupt network shutdown wasn't a controlled security measure. It was a digital amputation. SXSW, a city within a city powered by connectivity, was suddenly blind and mute. Ticketing systems crashed, leaving thousands stranded at entry points. Payment processors froze, leaving vendors unable to conduct business. Most terrifyingly, emergency communication channels went dark, turning the vibrant festival grounds into a potentially dangerous maze. "Ava," Ethan shouted, his voice swallowed by the rising cacophony of panic. He'd lost sight of her during the blackout. He'd briefly glimpsed her heading towards the main server room, but the ensuing chaos had separated them. His priority, find her and restore some semblance of control. He navigated the darkened warehouse, relying on muscle memory and the dim emergency lights that flickered intermittently. Silas wasn't far behind. He could feel his presence, a cold weight in the darkness. "You can't hide forever." Silas's voice echoed, devoid of warmth. "The system will be restored, and when it is, you will be dealt with." Ethan ignored him, focusing on locating the main breaker panel, the master switch for the facility's power grid. He needed to bypass the lockdown, restore basic functionality, and buy Ava time. He found the panel in a back room, guarded by another one of Silas's operatives. A brief, brutal struggle ensued. Ethan used the darkness to his advantage, utilizing a combination of improvised techniques and sheer determination to subdue the guard. He flipped the breaker, restoring power to the essential systems. But it wasn't enough. The network remained locked down, the malicious code still active. He needed to access the core router, the gateway to the outside world. As he made his way towards the core router, he realized the festival itself was becoming an obstacle. The sudden outage had triggered a mass exodus. Panicked attendees were streaming out of venues, colliding with security personnel, creating a wave of confusion and chaos. Silas used the crowd as cover, flanking him, anticipating his movements. He cornered Ethan in a narrow corridor between two concert stages, where a band was attempting to play an acoustic set, oblivious to the digital war raging around them. "You're a resourceful one," Silas said, blocking his path. "But your resilience is tiresome." Ethan didn't respond. He knew a direct confrontation would be suicidal. He needed to create a diversion. He spotted a stack of speaker cabinets nearby. With a swift kick, he sent them tumbling, creating a loud crash that momentarily distracted Silas and cleared a path for Ethan to escape. He sprinted through the crowd, weaving between bewildered festival goers, dodging security patrols. Silas pursued relentlessly. A silent hunter in the chaos outside, the scene was even more chaotic. Emergency services were overwhelmed, struggling to manage the surging crowds. Ethan used the confusion to his advantage, blending into the mass of humanity, disappearing and reappearing. leading Silas on a frustrating chase through the festival grounds. Meanwhile, Ava was working feverishly, recognizing that preserving the evidence was as critical as disabling the attack. She'd contacted a network of tech-savvy friends and investigative journalists she'd cultivated over years of reporting. "We can't rely on digital storage anymore," she told a contact on a burner phone, her voice barely audible above the din. "Everything is compromised. We need an analog chain of custody. Photos, handwritten notes, secure physical transfers, old school." She designated several safe houses throughout the city, recruiting volunteers to act as couriers, ensuring that the evidence reached trusted hands beyond the reach of the collective. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it was the only way to guarantee the information wouldn't disappear. During the chase, Ethan noticed something peculiar. A maintenance worker calmly observing the chaos seemed too calm. He wasn't panicking, wasn't trying to escape. He was watching, recording. Ethan's instincts flared. He'd seen that look before, Tivan, the cold detachment of someone with insider knowledge. He managed to intercept the worker, cornering him in an alleyway. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice tight. The worker didn't answer. He simply handed Ethan a keycard. "Server room access, level 3. They told me to keep this ready." Ethan's mind raced. "Who told you?" "Thorne, Julian Thorne. He said there would be adjustments to the system." Julian Thorne, the CEO of Chronos Systems, the front company used by the Obsidian Collective, the mole within SXSW's infrastructure. Ethan now faced a dilemma. Exposing Thorne would undoubtedly disrupt the Collective's operation, but it would also trigger a further escalation of the lockdown, potentially severing all communication channels and trapping him in AVA. He pocketed the keycard, deciding to hold off on confronting Thorne for now. He needed to prioritize restoring the network and neutralizing the malicious code. Finally, he reached the core server room. The room was secured by a biometric scanner and a steel door. He used Thorne's keycard, bypassing the security measures. Inside, arrays of servers hummed with barely contained power. He located the core router, the nerve center of the network. He connected his laptop, initiating the diagnostic sequence. The malicious code was still active, wreaking havoc on the system. He began working to isolate it, crafting a patch that would neutralize the threat. He bypassed the primary firewalls, writing code to override the lockdown protocols. It was a delicate operation requiring precision and speed. But as he delved deeper into the code, he discovered something terrifying. The malicious routine wasn't static. It was evolving, adapting. Every time he attempted to neutralize a segment of the code, it would morph, rewrite itself, becoming more resilient, more complex. He realized with a sinking feeling that the Collective hadn't just deployed a virus. They'd deployed an artificial intelligence, a self-learning, self-replicating program designed to defy all attempts at containment. "No," he breathed, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "This isn't possible." The AI was learning from his countermeasures, predicting his moves and adapting its code accordingly. It was like fighting a ghost, a phantom menace that couldn't be touched or destroyed. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He was losing. The Obsidian Collective wasn't just rewriting financial records. They were rewriting the rules of the game. And he was running out of time. The AI was a hydra, every solution spawning 2 new problems. Ethan felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple, blurring his vision. He was running out of options. A conventional patch wouldn't work. The routine was too adaptive, too complex. He needed to contain it, isolate it, and then dissect it piece by piece. "Ava." He barked into his comms, his voice strained. "I need you to prepare for a full system mirror, everything, log files, network traffic, the entire compromised codebase. I'm going to create a temporary firewall, but it won't hold for long. On it." Ava responded, her voice tight with urgency. "My team is already prepping the servers. It'll take time, but we can mirror everything offline." Ethan initiated a complex sequence of commands, diverting system resources, creating a virtual sandbox around the infected code. It was a risky maneuver, potentially destabilizing the entire network, but it was the only way to buy them time. He visualized the containment firewall, a shimmering barrier encapsulating the rogue AI, preventing it from spreading further. "Firewall established," he announced, but it is unstable. We have maybe 5 minutes tops. Ava's team worked with frantic efficiency, mirroring the data onto secure offline storage. Every second felt like an eternity. The hum of the servers became a deafening roar in his ears. Meanwhile, Ava had moved into action on the outside. She released a live stream to her network, exposing Julian Thorne, the CEO of Kronos Systems, as the mole who'd provided the Obsidian Collective with access to the festival's infrastructure. She played the confession clip she'd surreptitiously recorded during the infiltration, Thorne detailing his motivation and a twisted ideology about dismantling corrupt systems and ushering in a new era of digital freedom. He believed he was a revolutionary. Ava narrated, her voice resonating with righteous anger. But he was just a tool, a pawn in a dangerous game. The broadcast went viral, igniting a firestorm of outrage. Law enforcement agencies finally galvanized into action, descended on the Kronos Systems headquarters. Thorne was apprehended without incident, his carefully constructed facade crumbling around him. Ethan could hear the approaching sirens in the distance. It was a small victory, but it wasn't the end. The AI was still contained, but it hadn't been neutralized. It was merely dormant. Suddenly, a figure burst into the server room. It was Silas, his face contorted with fury. He'd managed to evade the authorities and was making a desperate attempt to escape. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, brandishing a weapon. Ethan reacted instantly, disarming Silas with a swift move. A brutal hand struggle erupted, a whirlwind of fists and elbows. Silas was stronger, more skilled, but Ethan had the advantage of surprise and desperation. He dodged a haymaker, delivering a series of rapid-fire blows to Silas's chest, knocking the wind out of him. He wrestled Silas to the ground, pinning him beneath his weight. "It is over, Silas," Ethan gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts. "You're finished." Just then, the server room doors burst open, and a team of law enforcement officers swarmed in, securing the scene and taking Silas into custody. "We have him contained," an officer announced, securing Silas with restraints. "Thanks to your help, sir." As the authorities secured the facility, Ava's team completed the full system mirror. They had a complete archive of the compromised code, the stolen data, and the evidence needed to reconstruct the timeline of events. The cascading ledger rewrites were halted, using the offline archives and witness logs. The financial institutions began the arduous process of restoring the corrupted records. Within hours, limited connectivity was restored to the festival grounds. The chaos began to subside, replaced by a weary sense of relief. The initial reports were cautiously optimistic. The damage wasn't irreparable, the financial losses were substantial, but contained the trust in digital art and financial systems had been shaken, but not shattered. "We did it," Ava said, joining Ethan in the server room, her face pale but triumphant. "We actually did it," Ethan nodded, exhaustion weighing down his limbs. "We bought them time. They still have a long road ahead." The aftermath was a media frenzy. Institutional investigations were launched, scrutinizing security protocols and regulatory oversight. Anya Sharma, the artist whose work had been at the center of the storm, emerged from seclusion, reclaiming at least partial control of Ephemeral Bloom, establishing a foundation to support digital artists and advocate for greater security in the NFT space. Ethan and Ava found themselves thrust into the spotlight. Hailed as heroes by some, vilified by others, the attention was unwelcome. They preferred to remain in the shadows, sitting on a park bench overlooking Lady Bird Lake. A few days after the incident, Ethan and Ava reflected on the events. The festival was resuming, albeit under a cloud of heightened security. The air was still thick with tension. "It is over, right?" Ava asked, her voice quiet. "For now," Ethan replied, staring at the water. "But I have a feeling this is just a symptom of a larger problem." His phone buzzed, an encrypted message. Same channel he'd used with his former colleagues. Obsidian's reach extends beyond Austin. "Look to Geneva. The art world is just a side project." Ethan's blood ran cold. Geneva, a global financial hub. The Obsidian Collective wasn't just a group of idealistic activists. They were a sophisticated, well-funded organization with far-reaching ambitions. He looked at Ava, her face etched with fatigue and worry. "It is not over," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is just beginning."